Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning, this is Jonathan Small, host of All About You. This program is broadcast every week from AccessTV.org studios in downtown Hartford. And this show is designed to give the guests a chance to give their life story. This morning I have a very inspirational, interesting guest who is coming out of state to be on this program this morning. He is the president and CEO of the YMCA of the greater Springfield, Massachusetts area. His name is Kirk Smith. Good morning, Kirk. How you doing?
Good morning.
All right. Could you kind of let people know exactly where you were born and raised?
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a community we call Avondale, which is a very, very large, probably the largest African-American community, probably in western Ohio, southwestern Ohio. Yep.
What was it like growing up in that particular area?
Well, you know, it was difficult. I don't think I realized how difficult it was. And what that means is when you're living in this bubble, you really don't recognize some of the challenges that you're faced with. Obviously, you know, typical large urban, economically challenged community, poverty, you know, prostitution, you know, all types of crime, drug abuse. I mean, you name it. Most of the families were single-parent homes, lots of housing projects and that type of thing. So it was a tough area.
Did that kind of bother you or intimidate you growing up in that type of environment?
I think, again, living in that bubble, you don't recognize. I mean, we used to go trick-or-treating in apartment buildings. So that's a little bit different from going house to house. So if you can imagine going up and down stairwells and you're knocking on apartment doors. So you're trying to keep track of what number you're at. You're trick-or-treating in an apartment building. It's a little bit different from an experience, you know, walking from street to street. Not that we didn't do the street part of it, but you kind of thought that was the way it was, you know, so I didn't really see that being any different from anybody else until I started getting exposure to other things. And I will say my mom, she worked a couple jobs and we lived in a house. So in my neighborhood, if you lived in a house, you were like the richest poor person around.
Okay.
Although the house was full of people and sometimes people I didn't even know was related to me. But at any rate, so that was kind of how it was. So I really didn't look at it as bad. Until I started getting exposure and got a little older and started seeing other things, I said, wait a minute, this is a lot worse than some other people.
Now, in Cincinnati, it's like a city known for Procter & Gamble, a major company. You have tremendous sports teams, the Cincinnati Reds, the Cincinnati Bengals. Were you enjoyed participating in any particular sports?
Well, I didn't get a chance to go to a lot of games, and I went to some Reds games. But again, and that was really the way for us coming. It was sports, so there was a lot of local teams, neighborhood teams, and that was really something that I really used, particularly as a young person, to keep me busy. I was a Cub Scout, so I would try to get involved with all of these things to stay active. But sports was a really, really big deal in my neighborhood.
Plus, you had a tremendous boxer, Aaron Pryor, that was from Cincinnati. Was he like a big hero in that particular town?
Aaron Pryor was one of our heroes. Okay. And he unfortunately, he really represents, you know, kind of like when you have young people like myself that doesn't have a father, no real positive male role models, and you see a guy like Aaron Pryor fall the way that he did, you know, getting involved with drugs and all these other things, it's very disappointing because growing up, he was our hero. He was like, he was Superman to us. And to see him fall the way that he did was very, very painful. But again, it's really a microcosm of what we witnessed on a regular basis, that, you know, you kind of put these people up on the pedestal and then they fall, and then you kind of ask yourself, you know, where are the heroes? And he was definitely one of my heroes growing up.
Okay. I believe he came along in the 80s, the early 80s era.
Yeah.
And he was probably one of the best boxers pound for pound at that particular time.
Oh, yeah.
Now, questions about Cincinnati, where you grew up in, I guess, inner city part of the city. Did you get a chance to cover other areas of Cincinnati, different exposures?
Well, if it was in walking distance, if it was within walking distance, we went there.
Okay.
We walked a lot, and very few people had a car. And if you got in any type of taxi, it wasn't a traditional taxi with the little sign that says taxi in a little yellow or white cab. It was somebody driving. We used to call it bootleg.
Bootleg. All right.
Bootleg cab drivers where there was no meter. So you paid them either in cash or it was in kind. So you would give them something to drink.
Okay.
The adults would give them beer for a ride, across town or something. So that was the reality. So if we could walk, so everything was in my neighborhood. And Avondale is probably the size, like in New England, it's probably the size of a couple towns.
Okay.
I mean, it was a very large neighborhood. And it was a neighborhood, not a town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you come from a family of 7 brothers and sisters?
Well, yeah, 7 brothers and sisters. I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers.
Okay. Now, was there any challenges in that type of family structure that you had existed in?
No doubt about it. Again, not having a father around. I think amongst the 8 of us, there were probably 3 or 4 different fathers.
Okay.
So I guess by some definition we would be half sisters and brothers, because everyone, there was only a few of us that came from the same mother and father.
Okay.
So we were sort of piecemeal together that way. It was very, very difficult. I was bullied. Most of my elementary school experience, I was picked on, beat up probably for a few years, almost every day. As a result of me not being able to pay attention in school, I ended up failing the 3rd grade because I couldn't focus, because I was worried about the safest way home. I can remember crying on a regular basis, wanted to kill myself at 8, 9 years old. Thank God they didn't have Google, because if they did, I probably wouldn't be here, because nowadays you can just look up something and it's that easy. And I got to that point where I was very depressed. My stepfather was abusive, not so much to us. He was more verbally and intimidating to us, but he was alcoholic and would tear the house apart. Like when he go on one of his drunken tirades, he would just destroy the entire house. And we had this little record player, and back then, that little needle to play that little record, that was a big deal. He would break all the needles, and throw things all over the house, and we would just kind of huddle up, in the hallway there, and just letting stuff that he was throwing across the room hit our backs and that type of thing. But he was insane. And then he ultimately molested one of my sisters, and my mom. And back then, you didn't call the police; you just put them out.
Well, Kirk,
it was tough.
Excuse me. Let's be honest. This was a dysfunctional household
No
that
question.
you was raised in, and when you're 8 and 9 years old and you're contemplating committing suicide. Did you have any other people that you could turn to? Any extended families? Any other social outlets?
Not really. I mean, my oldest brother, he was kind of a uncle type figure to me. But really, we had no places to go. People just didn't have the capacity. Like, no one knew how to help you. So when you take problems to them, well, they were struggling themselves. So you take folks with no background in terms of structure themselves. They come out of broken families, then they come to your family. I mean, it just compounds the problem. So you really have no help. So you're really left to yourself. And in my case, I just was very much a dreamer. So I would just put myself in different places mentally. Okay. So although I may have been there physically, kind of in a metaphysical way, I would put myself in these other places. And that's how I kept my sanity. But there was nowhere you could go.
Did it get any easier once you got into high school? Because I don't know exactly when you left Cincinnati, but I know you graduated from Cincinnati. Was it getting any easier when you got into high school? It
got a little better. By the time I got to about the 10th grade, 9th, 10th grade, things got a little better, started to clear up a little bit for me. And I started working and that type of thing. And I could start to sense that things were not right, like in my community. So as I mentioned earlier, I didn't know there was something wrong with seeing an alcoholic asking kids to buy him beer, or he would buy beer for kids, and I didn't know that was wrong. I didn't think that was what's wrong with that, or my friends having a different father every other month. They had to call somebody else daddy. I thought that was just the way it was. But when I got older, I started questioning things. Like, wait a minute, this guy's 22 years old on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock drinking a 40 ounce.
Okay.
Something didn't jive with that. On a weekday at 1, drinking beer, shouldn't you be at work or something? So I started to become very curious when I got to about the 9th or 10th grade.
And you did graduate from high school?
Yeah, Woodward High School, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, when you got to the point of graduating high school, what were you thinking about would be your next move at that point?
I wanted to go to college, desperately. Wanted to go to college, did very, very good in high school, in terms of my grades and that type of thing, and was ready to go. And then went to apply for grants and financial aid, got rejected, and didn't realize that my mom had claimed me on her taxes. So I was trying to go independent, and no one knew what to do. No one in my family understood that process.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know anything about scholarships. They didn't know anything about financial aid. I mean, no one could help me. So I said, okay, well, what do I do? So I went to the military, and the military said, look, we'll pay for your college. We'll do A, B, C, and D. And so I left, and my recruiter didn't have to recruit me. I told him, I'll make your job easy.
Okay.
You know, just get me out of here. And when I was in boot camp, you had guys that wanted to go home that couldn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm not going back to where I came from. And that's one of the things that motivated me. But yeah, so I just decided to get out and went straight to the military.
Now, at that point, did you have any, well, you said you didn't want to be in that part of the environment. No. So you had no intention on ever going back? You just wanted to start your life from this point on? Yeah,
not living in that community. And contrary to what some people may tell you, that no one likes living in the hood.
Right.
You know, people could talk about how it's good. I've heard songs, it's good in the hood, and the hood loves me. And, man, no one wants to live in that environment where there's no money, there's poverty, there's death, there's, you know, broken homes. No one wants to live there, you know. And I was one of the people, once I realized exactly where I wanted to get out. And so I had no intentions on ever living in that community again.
Mm-hmm. And would it also be fair to say not many people want to invest in those type of areas too?
Very fair to say. That's a very true statement. In fact, you know, I think what they do it now, they just isolated the crime. You know, you kind of kept the crime sort of circled off in that community, and as long as it stayed within there, it was okay. But I think it becomes an issue when those types of activities get in some of those suburban and other communities. So I think that living in that community, living in that environment, I think it was okay for some people for us to sort of kill ourselves. And I think some people are okay with that.
Well, I got to be kind of honest. I think a lot of people throughout the country might not be aware of that there's two Cincinnatis. I know they had the television fictional series, WKRP in Cincinnati. But nobody really ever shows too much of images of the type of environments that you kind of grew up in that particular part of the country.
Yeah, there's no question. In Cincinnati, I like the way you put that, two different Cincinnati's. I mean, it's probably more than two. But there's several different identities in that town. But again, Cincinnati's not unique to any other major metropolitan area across the country.
Right.
That's, you know, you control the image, and that's that ugly side you don't want people to see. You know, and we lived through that. You know, no one wanted to be where we were. You know, it's just a fact. And we didn't even have national chains. Like we didn't have national restaurants and grocery stores and that type of thing in our community for a long time. Everything was mom and pop. I don't even recall even seeing a cash register or a receipt for many, many years of my life.
Now, after you finished the service, where did you decide to relocate or move to at that particular point?
So again, while I was in the military, you know, I took a number of college classes, and the campuses would sort of follow you. So I was kind of, you know, my transcript early was kind of all over the map. But what I did is when I got out of the military, you know, I was married. I got married while I was in the military, and, you know, I've been married to my beautiful wife, Vanessa, for 22 years. And I have a 22-year-old, 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old son. So at any rate, we moved back to Cincinnati. I lived in a different community, but I went back to Cincinnati for 5 years.
Was that a better part of Cincinnati?
It was a better part of Cincinnati. You know, and I kind of felt like that's where we needed to be at the time, because I did have family there, with a young family and sort of starting off. So we went there for 5 years before I ended up ultimately going from there to Florida.
Now, you had like a job offer down in Florida when you decided to go to Florida?
The story, I can't talk about my life without talking about the influence that Jesus Christ has had on my family now, and how he really rescued us from a lot of stuff. And I will tell you, and the reason I say that is that when I left Cincinnati, I had a pretty good job. You know, I was working a couple jobs, as a matter of fact, and we felt God was leading us to go to another place. So I actually left Cincinnati making half of what I was making in Cincinnati. When I moved to Florida, I took a job. I was making like $8-something an hour to take care of my family. I lived in subsidized housing and everything. So we basically left everything and moved to Florida with nothing. And we lived in a 700 square foot apartment, all 5 of us. And that's what happened. That's why we felt led by God to do that.
Okay, so God kind of entered your life at that particular stage.
Well, I would say in the early 90s.
The early 90s?
93 is when I really got serious. I mean, I was born again in 89 at boot camp, but probably around 92, 93, I started getting serious about my faith. So even as going to Cincinnati, we felt God led us to do that as well. But, you know, we kind of felt like it was time to make a move from Cincinnati to Florida. And yeah, I mean, that was no question, it was His grace that got us to where we are now.
Was there anything in particular that kind of let God into your life? Any tragic or any experience, just your own personal faith?
Well, when I was in boot camp, I was just nervous that I wouldn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, look, and most people I think come to Christ not to go to heaven, but to get out of something.
Okay.
So like now heaven, we can talk about that later, but the main reason people come to Christ is because they're in trouble. They come to Christ due to crisis. And then we can talk about heaven later. You're not going to win a whole lot of people just promise them heaven, promise them deliverance from their current situation. Then we can talk about heaven. And that's how it worked for me. So, I came close to dying after boot camp, and I kind of got away. But after boot camp, I came very close to dying. Got very, very sick. And I remember sitting in the hospital in a dark room and praying and asking God to deliver me from the situation, and He did. And then my life hasn't been the same since. So it's kind of like these two parts. I was in boot camps. Okay, God, okay, if getting saved would get me through boot camp, Jesus, would you be my Savior? I got through boot camp, started doing whatever, and that's when I had that near-death experience, and then that kind of went from there.
Well, let's end the first part of this segment, and let's come back and let people know exactly what was your next move after that particular stage.
All right. No problem.
This is Jonathan Small. I'm hosting All About You this morning with my guest, President and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Springfield, Mass. And we're going to be right back very shortly. Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here tonight to congratulate and support AccessTV.org. AccessTV.org has reached hundreds and thousands of people. It's done a great job informing the community about important issues in our city, our state, and our nation. I congratulate Stan McCauley and Nyesha for the job they've done. And now with their new format, which will reach many more people, and which will be available through many more formats, the future is very bright for AccessTV.org. Congratulations, and may you continue your mission of informing our community. Thank you very much.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.
Welcome back. This is Jonathan Small hosting All About You, and this morning I have the President and CEO of the YMCA in Greater Springfield, Kirk Smith. Kirk Smith, I kind of want to get into your next chapter. I know there's a lot of things about your life that many people may not be aware of, but I kind of do want to highlight, some of the success stories that your life has now currently have. Pretty much, where do you reside at in this part of the country?
Well, right now I live in Wilbraham, Massachusetts, which is basically, in the Greater Springfield area. A typical New England town.
Okay.
Yeah, good community.
Pretty much you and your wife are very successful. Would it be fair to say you're like a middle-class African-American
Yeah,
family?
I don't even know if middle class exists anymore. These days it's like there's only two classes, the have and the have-nots.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess you could say that. We've been fortunate and had some opportunities to land in some good places in life, and not without a lot of hard work. That's for sure. But yeah, we're, again, we've been married 22 years and, had 3 boys and, been able to raise them, we think, pretty well. Still trying to make sure that's the case. They're 17, 20, and 22, so they're starting their lives, and older son's in the military. So, so we think we've been doing okay so far.
Now, you have a very high profile position as a CEO and a president, and pretty much you work very hard to put yourself in that position. But when you go and you engage with other people from that area that comes into the YMCA, what are some of the issues and challenges that you're seeing?
Well, the issues, it's funny because it's, rural, suburban, and urban communities, they all have their set of problems, their set of issues. And it's funny how when you look at issues in urban communities, how we talk about that, we publicize that, we make a big deal about it as if they don't exist in other places. And I'll give you one small example. Now, nationally, the teenage birth rate, so teenage, girls 12 to 19 or so nationally, for every 1,000, 34 are having babies.
Okay.
Documented, went to the hospital, delivered the child. So that doesn't mean that only 34 out of 1,000 are getting pregnant.
Okay.
It's 34 out of 1,000 that are documented going to the hospital, delivering children.
Okay.
In the state of Massachusetts, 17 to every 1,000. So you would think, well, wow, that's pretty good. That's half the national average. But if you look at areas like Springfield, for example, 65 for every 1,000, and places like Holyoke, not far from Springfield, it's 85 for every 1,000. So when you think about that number, that's really the state's pregnancy rate is right there in that Western Mass area, and then obviously areas around Boston. Now you go to some of the, so before Massachusetts could talk about, well, we're not having babies in, say, some of the suburban communities. Well, first of all, in those urban communities, they don't have access to contraceptives like you may have. They don't have the parental or those types of support systems. But it's not like they're having more sex. They're just getting pregnant more often. Right?
Right.
So what we try to do in these communities, often we make it sound as if, one community is having more problems than others. The fact of the matter is we talk more about problems in urban communities than we do in, say, suburban and rural communities. We talk about it a lot more. So a lot of the issues that we face around sexual health, sexual behavior, alcoholism, drug abuse, it's consistent across the spectrum in our area. Suburban, urban, and rural.
Well, where your headquarters is located at, that's basically in the downtown section of Springfield?
Yep, the north end.
The north end, okay.
Yep.
What type of problems now that are being brought into the YMCA, or what type of issues that you have to deal with throughout the week?
Well, poverty is at the core.
Okay.
So when you think about poverty, what's everything associated with that? So high crime, lots of gun violence, seems to be a huge issue. Drug abuse. Is on the rise, in gang activity. I mean, those are really huge things. But again, poverty really creates that. When folks are struggling financially, they tend to go in those other directions.
So they're coming to the YMCA looking to have these issues resolved. Or, I mean, they're looking for some type of assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're looking for opportunities to learn about nutrition, to live healthier lives. Everything from trying to be better students. Some of the young people, we have a number of seniors who are on fixed income or no income that want to live longer, want to be healthier, and many of them find themselves taking care of small children. So they're 65 taking care of a 6-year-old because either mom or dad are in prison or on drugs or are dead. So we see a lot of those issues. So as a result, we have to really provide a lot of financial aid to make the Y accessible to those families.
Now, you can kind of relate because of your background, how you grew up, to some of the conditions that as the young kids are being shown, or being brought into the YMCA.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you don't mind, I'll go back a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
And the fact that, again, I mentioned that I was born in a single parent home. So you got these 8 kids, and you have other, extended family members kind of sharing this same space. And so in my case, I was a product of adultery.
Okay.
I was a kid that was born because a guy decided to cheat on his wife with my mom and bring me into this world and really keep me a secret. I was born 2 months earlier, 2 or 3 months premature, so I developed slowly. So I was this funny looking kid, big ears, still have them, but I've grown into them. But rotten teeth, frail, just this sickly kid. Brought into this world that really wasn't supposed to be here. And to everybody around me, at least those that were involved with the situation, really a fictional character, almost like a mistake. And so I was kept a secret from my father's family to protect him. And so they felt it was best that I didn't know. So I missed out on an entire side of my family all of these years because I was supposed to be a secret. And that hurt, man. That was difficult to deal with. So I would say to young people, you really don't have any control over what you're born into.
Right.
Like none of us can control that. If you're born into poverty or whatever the case may be, but you do have control over how you respond to that environment and what you do with that. And you can have something to do with your destiny. And you don't have to say, well, because I'm born poor, no father, single mom, blah, 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 I live in the projects, concrete jungle, I'm supposed to be nothing. Well, no, that's not the case. You can do whatever you want to do no matter where you come from. That's what I believe.
Well, let's see, Kurt, let me ask you a question. Yeah. Do a lot of the young urban kids look at you as the success, or do they look at LeBron James or Jay-Z? I mean, the rap game, the hip-hop game, the professional sports game seems to be attracting a lot of the young kids towards that's what they want to be.
Right.
Do they see themselves being a president or a CEO of the YMCA or some other type of organization?
Well, I wish the latter was true.
Okay.
The reality is that they do see these music folks, producers and basketball and all these different athletes, and they look at them because it's glamorized.
Right.
And naturally, for young people, they're always looking for the easiest way to the top. So you think that's easier if I go that route versus this route. I represent probably more. They're more likely to be where I am than where those guys are.
Right.
There's more people out actually working hard and getting educated than it is playing a sport or producing songs or what have you. So the reality is they do see those people. I do think there are some young people that kind of look at a person like myself as an example, as a role model. I think that happens a little bit later for them as they get older and they start to realize some reality starts to set in. I wish more young people looked at people like myself as something that they could be, more so than the athletes and the music artists and so on and so forth. But the reality is I don't think they look at where I am is as achievable as those other things.
Do you think now that brings another challenge towards trying to reach the young people, guys? It's not only now the drug dealers and the gang bangers out there that has the fast, easy money that they have to that you have to be concerned with. Even when you're trying to get them on the educational, positive side, you still got to look at the high money that they hear these entertainers and these athletes make, and you're making a very good salary, able to take care of your own family. So,
right. Well, I think you got to look at it this way, like. Young people always look up to people who are popular. They always look at, like I said, we talked about Aaron Pryor. So you're going to always, and there's nothing wrong with that, to see African Americans, people of color, whether Hispanic or whatever the case may be, to see folks that look like you doing well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. But the reality is you have two types of kids in every community, and I'll focus primarily on urban. You have corner kids and porch kids. So those corner kids, those are the ones that are in the gangs. They want to sell you drugs. They want to beat you up. They want to commit crimes. They want to rob you, whatever. That's the corner kids. The porch kids, however, are the kids, if you give them an opportunity, give them a field trip, give them a tutor, give them a mentor, give them a counselor, expose them, that type of thing, they'll gravitate to that. They'll gravitate to a program. And they represent the majority. There's way more porch kids than there are corner kids. However, we focus on the corner kids, put all our energy into the corner kids.
Right.
And then the porch kids, because there's nowhere for them to go, they become corner kids. But if we focus on those kids that will listen to us, in other words, I'm only interested in speaking to those who are going to listen. I have no interest in speaking to anyone that doesn't want to hear what I have to say.
Right.
So if you do it that way, then what the porch kids become are ambassadors to the corner kids. They begin to draw them in. So I think most kids, in their minds, right, they want what's best. Most kids in their minds, no matter where they live, they want to be okay, they want a better life. Most young people. But there are some who, quite frankly, they want to go a different way.
Yes.
And so why spend so much time trying to rescue people who have no desire to be saved? Rescue those who are reaching out, saying, save me. If you save them, then you have a shot at saving the other ones.
Well, those words are well spoken, Kirk Smith, and I know you are involved with your church and other organizations, but clearly your career position that you have right now is the president and CEO of the YMCA. Does the buck stop with you, or does you have to work with other people involved with the YMCA? I mean, do you have the real final word on what goes on in the YMCA?
Yeah, well, I do want to say that I look at my work in the Y as ministry.
Okay.
I think most ministries are in our workplaces. Churches, small part of it, and that's small. You're talking in a room full of Christians. Anybody can go around Christians and talk about God and helping people. That whatever. You got the Bible for that.
Okay.
But most ministry is at work, in the cubicles, in the hallways, in the offices, in the boardroom. So I think what I do is ministry, and it's no less significant than any pastor or Catholic priest or whomever. I think this is valuable work. In terms of decision making, I am the president here. I'm the chief executive officer. I'm the chief executive decision maker. However, I have to work collaboratively with volunteers. I have several boards that I'm accountable to, several committees that I have to work with to move the YMCA's agenda forward. I have to work with leaders in the municipal community, Commonwealth, state level leadership around government. I have to work with other businesses. I have to work with other nonprofits. So really to move the Y forward is really a collaborative effort. So it's not like a monarchy or some kind, like I'm a genius with 1,000 helpers or some guru. I have to work with a lot of people to move the Y forward on a daily basis. So, I don't think having absolute power is the best way to go anyway.
Right.
I believe in consensus, and I don't really believe in unilateral decision making. I think you should involve others. I think that's the best way. It's more democratic.
Well, let me ask you something, Kurt.
Yeah.
Do you see the conditions that you grew up in Cincinnati and the conditions that you see up in Springfield as the two urban sectors getting any better? Are they about the same, or are they getting worse?
I think it depends on how you measure.
Okay.
I think from a culturally, particularly issues around race, I think we have a long way to go.
Okay.
I think when you look at the areas, there's just a lot to be done there, and I think that hinders us when we're not able to come together around that issue, because that really, you're missing out on talent. What happens is within, so for example, the African American communities that I've been involved in throughout my career, and even it's true here, that even amongst our own communities, there's a level of mistrust amongst one another. And I think that hurts us because we don't work together as much as we should. I think if we do, we'll be better off. I also think there's some issues when you start talking about bringing people together at different levels. So again, you have some folks that fights the battle on the picket line, in the streets, but there's a battle to be fought in the boardroom, and we got to be able to fight on both fronts. But I think when you talk about education, I see improvement. I see a commitment to that, and the stats prove that, particularly in Springfield, that the graduation rate is increasing. It's above 50%. I think we're about 55, 56% now. I see that getting better. I am very concerned about the drug issue that we're having, and it seems to just continue to grow. That just seems to be a huge issue. And then you have the number of people moving into the area that do not have the job skills and they don't have the credentials and that type of thing to really contribute to the economy in a real meaningful way. So the economic development, I think we're still struggling with. The drug issue seems to be becoming a larger issue, but I do see some hope in education. That's really the key, is the education.
Well, up in Springfield, they are very close to having gambling brought up into that part of the society, of that part of this state. Do you think that's going to be another challenge now that you might have to deal with the people being addicted to gambling being brought into the YMCA? Yeah,
well, I'll kind of put it this way. I get it that Springfield needs that economic sort of pop, to really bring some real revenue into that area, because it's struggling financially. I mean, it's difficult, and so I get the mayor's plight and the city's effort to really, bring something to the area, not just the casino, but other things to the area to really improve the economy. And you can't knock them for that, and I get that and I understand it. I also realize that when you bring a casino, okay, there's going to be people who gamble a little that will now gamble a lot.
Yes.
There's going to be people who thought about gambling. They're going to decide to gamble. There's going to be people who never thought about gambling. That's now going to think about gambling. And with that, there's going to be some direct and ancillary issues that's going to come about. We know that. MGM understands that, and I think they're working really hard to prepare for that. So places like the YMCA, other nonprofits, while I don't think a nonprofit would be wise to get behind or against the casino. I do think nonprofits need to be ready to be that safety net around the casino when people fall, because they most certainly will. So I think it comes down to preparation. Let's face reality that there's going to be problems associated with that. There's some pros, there's some cons. So, when you get to an area like Springfield, what do? You have to do something to help that area, man, because we're struggling up there financially. So it's kind of like two sides to the issue for me.
Let me just ask you one last question, because we're just about we're out of time.
Okay.
But I just think this question is kind of important. you are in a position that you can pretty much consider yourself marketable. You can, if things in Springfield falls apart and you don't want to deal with the realities, you have the type of credentials to move on. If it ever gets to that point that this casino and gambling is going to make the city so much worse, and then you decide, look, I don't want to be here anymore, are you kind of committed towards what Springfield might have to deal with, or are you kind of keeping your options open?
Well, in terms of my commitment professionally, you know, as long as the work is rewarding, as long as we can continue to impact lives, change lives, make people better, then I'm all for it, and the work is being supported. So whether it's a casino or not a casino, that's my commitment to the area. I don't believe in running from problems. I believe in running to opportunities. So if things are difficult, that wouldn't be a reason for me to leave. But if there's an opportunity to make even larger impact, because I consider myself, I'm a globally, you know, macro-minded person, that I think my purpose on this earth is not limited to any geographic area. That I can do all things anywhere. You know, so that's my belief.
Well, those words are going to have to be the last words, and those words are well spoken, and I really appreciate you and your staff coming down this morning to be a guest on this show, and I hope people was able to learn something about your life that you wanted them to learn.
I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem.
Thanks.
Okay. This is Jonathan Small. I had enjoyed hosting this program this morning with my guest, President and CEO Kirk Smith of the YMCA of Greater Springfield. And like I mentioned to you, every single week you can watch a lot of programs on accesstv.org network. And as I also say to people out there, for everybody, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.